under Dharma Gems, there is the text in English. And I would like to read the text now so we can all be updated. The Essence of Mahayana Practice, complete title, Great Master Bodhidharma's Essential Discourse on Entering the Mahayana Path by Principle and by Practice. To enter the Great Way, there are many paths, but essentially there are of two means, by principle and by practice. Entering the way by principle means to awaken to the truth through the doctrine, with a deep faith that all sentient beings have the same true nature. Obscured by the fleeting dust of delusions, this nature cannot manifest itself. If one can relinquish the false and turn to the true, fix the mind in wall meditation, understand that there are neither self nor others, that mortals and saints are equal and one, abiding this way without wavering, clinging not even to the scriptures, then one is implicitly in accord with the principle. Being non-discriminative, still and empty of effort is to enter by principle. Entering by principle means following four practices that encompass all other practices. There are accepting adversity, adapting to conditions, seeking nothing, and acting in accordance with the Dharma. What is the practice of accepting adversity? When suffering, a practitioner of the way should reflect, for innumerable kalpas I have pursued the trivial instead of the essential, drifted through all spheres of existence, created much animosity and hatred, maligned and harmed others endlessly. Even though now I have done no wrong, I am reaping the karmic consequences of past transgressions. If it is something neither the heavens nor people can oppose upon me, therefore I should accept it willingly, without any resentment or objection. The sutra says, face hardships without distress. How? With thorough insight. With this understanding in mind, you are in accord with the principle, advancing on the way through the experience of adversity. This is called the practice of accepting adversity. Second is the practice of adapting to conditions. Sentient beings are without a self, being steered by karmic conditions. Suffering and joy are experienced together as a result of causes and conditions. Any reward, blessing, or honor is a consequence of past causes. Nothing remains when the necessary conditions are exhausted. So what is there to be joyful about? Knowing that success and failure depend on conditions, the mind remains unmoved by the wind of joy, experiencing neither gain nor loss. This is to be in harmony with the way. Therefore, it is called the practice of adapting to conditions. Third, to seek nothing. Ordinary people in their perpetual ignorance crave and form attachments to everything, everywhere. This is called seeking. The wise are awakened to the truth and choose reason over convention. Even though their forms follow the law of causality, their minds are at peace and empty of effort. Since all existence is empty, there is nothing to be desired. Blessing and darkness always follow each other. This long sojourn in the triple realm is like living in a burning house. To have a body is to suffer. How can one attain peace? Those who understand this renounce all mundane existence, cease desires and stop seeking. The sutra says, to seek is to suffer, to seek nothing is bliss. It follows that to seek nothing is to truly follow the way. This is the practice of seeking nothing. Fourth, to act in accordance with the Dharma. The principle of intrinsic purity is the Dharma. By this principle, all forms and characteristics are empty, without defilements and attachments, without self or others. The sutra says, in the Dharma there are no sentient beings, because it is free of the impurity of sentient beings. In the Dharma there is no self, because it is free of the impurities of self. When the wise believe in and understand this principle, they should also act in accordance with the Dharma. There is no parsimony in the Dharma, so practice of giving of body, life, and possessions without any reservation. Understand and achieve triple emptiness, with no reliance and no attachment. One liberates others without becoming attached to form, thus removing impurities. This benefits oneself, benefits others, and also glorifies the Bodhi path. Dana is perfected this way. So are the other five paramitas. In order to relinquish delusions, one practices these 6 perfections. Yet nothing is practice. This is to act in accordance with the Dharma. Now that is the text, and first of all, today in this first lesson, I would like to share a few things about the author of the text, about Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was an Indian Chan master, we say the 28th patriarch of the Chan tradition. He lived in the 5th and 6th century, and the date of his birth is uncertain. And so we only, because he lived in India, he was born from southern India, and he was a prince, one of the youngest of 3 princes, and his father was a king who was very fond of Buddhism. And then one day he was very generous to Buddhist monks and very respectful. And one day he heard that one venerable master, Bodhi Prajnadhara, that was the 27th patriarch, he was on the way to his kingdom and to give teachings there, and the king was very joyful and invited the venerable Prajnadhara to his palace. And as it was the custom to make offerings to monks and nuns, and because he was the king, of course he was very rich, and so he wanted to make an offering of the most precious thing that he had in his storage. So there is also something that we can note. Of course, those are not the important things about the story, but actually when we listen to Dharma stories, we can take care, we can pay attention to also the small details and learn something also from the small details. So here the king was very generous, and he was not stingy. He really wanted to give something that was very precious to him. And so he looked in his storage and he found a very precious pearl. And in those days, pearls, now you can find them everywhere, but in those days, pearls were very precious, because there were people had to dive and get the mussels and find the pearls. That was very dangerous. So pearls were very rare and precious. So he had this precious pearl, And when the Venerable Prajnadhara came to his palace, he offered the pearl, and the Venerable saw he had 3 sons. So he already knew, because he had the power of mind to know many things. He knew that the youngest son was very capable of the Dharma. So he wanted to test the sons. And then he asked the question, this is the very precious pearl, he asked. Is there anything that can transcend the perfection and the clarity of this pearl? That was his question. And the 2 older brothers, the 2 older sons, they answered, this is the most precious pearl in the world. There's nothing that can transcend the perfection or the clarity. And because you, Venerable, you have realized the path, so you are worthy of receiving this pearl. That was a very polite answer, and of course not wrong, but Bodhidharma answered totally differently. And he said, this pearl is a worldly jewel. It cannot be called the highest. In all jewels, the Dharma jewel is the highest. This is worldly radiance and cannot be called the highest. Among all radiance, the radiance of wisdom is the highest. This is worldly clarity. Among all clarity, the clarity of the mind is the highest. This pearl is radiant and clear, but it cannot shine on itself. It needs the radiance Sorry, there must be a bad connection. So this jewel is not jewel by itself. It can only be jewel because we need the wisdom of the mind to distinguish this as a jewel. So this is the answer. And then he said, because the master has his way, the master has the path, so therefore the jewel manifests. And actually all sentient beings have a path, and their jewel of the mind is equal. So that is the answer of Bodhidharma as a prince before he actually learned anything about Buddhism. So here we can see he was a teenager and he was very wise, and this wisdom came directly from his mind. So the answer here is about the pearl, although it's very beautiful and shining, but the pearl itself is not precious, because it's only precious because we define it with our mind as something precious. The pearl, when it's being put in the garden, the birds, they don't see that the pearl is precious. They just see it as some other stone, or maybe even some food, and then they eat it up and then it's gone. So we need our wisdom to distinguish that this is a pearl. And so that's why he is saying what is real precious is not the pearl as a material thing, but is the pearl of our mind, is our true mind. And that is our true jewel. And the master has its way. So that means the master has realized the way, has been enlightened to the way. So the pearl of his mind, this true jewel, can manifest by itself. And all sentient beings have the same jewel. All sentient beings have this true, pure mind. And in that respect, they are all equal. But of course, what he doesn't say here is that sentient beings, when they are not enlightened, sorry, something is wrong here with the internet. Normally it works very well when I'm teaching online. Yeah, so the Venerable Prajnadhara, the 27th patriarch, he realized that this young man there, he was very special and he had very deep wisdom already without any instructions. So he wanted to test him again, and he asked him a question. Among all things, which thing has no form? And then he answered, among all things, not giving rise has no form. That means not the mind that is not giving rise to any thought. Yeah, the mind that is not giving rise to any thought has no form. And then the question, among all things, which thing is the highest? And then Bodhidharma answers, among all things, the ego is the highest. And then among all things, which is the greatest? And then Bodhidharma, among all things, the Dharma nature is the greatest. And then Prajnadhara knew that he was very special, but he also knew, and that is the wisdom of a great teacher, he knew that the time is not right. He knew the timing is not right to ask him to become his disciple. So he just had a tea with the king and then he left. But he knew also that when the time is right, he will take care and teach this son. And so he waited, and well, there's some details about, I don't want to go into the details now of Bodhidharma's life, but then later, not short after, his father became ill and suddenly passed away, and he was a very great king and very popular in the country. So he had many people who cried, and everyone cried, and only Bodhidharma, he didn't cry. He sat in front of the coffin and entered a deep state of meditation, a deep state of samadhi, and didn't come out of that state of samadhi for 7 days. And when he came out, he knew the time was right and he asked to be a monk. And then later he was then, because the king had passed away, he was allowed to become a monk. And then later he looked for his teacher, Prajnadhara, and became his disciple. And then later the teacher told him that he transmitted the mind seal to him. That means he made him the 28th patriarch, because he was deeply enlightened to the nature of true mind. And then his teacher told him that 60 years after his death, after the teacher's death, he should go to the east, to China, because people in China were ready to understand this deep teaching of true mind, of Buddha nature. And so the teacher had passed on the mind seal to Bodhidharma, and Bodhidharma went on teaching in India and also had many disciples who also had different degrees of enlightenment. And he sent 2 disciples to China to check out China. And then later he when he saw the time was right, according to the prophecy of his teacher, he went on a boat trip to China via Sri Lanka, which took about 3 years, because in those days there was no easy jet, and so you couldn't fly easily in a few hours, arrive at some destination. And even going by ship, there was sailing boats, you had to go with the winds, and the winds were seasonal. So when the winds changed direction, maybe you got stranded somewhere for 6 months. So that whole trip took him 3 years. In those 3 years, he could learn Chinese. And then when he arrived in China, there was a king, so China was actually divided in several kingdoms at that time. And there was a king, King Liang, or Emperor Liang, who heard about the arrival of this venerable old monk. And he was already very old. Remember, that was 60 years after his teacher passed away. So he was very old when he arrived. And so the Emperor Liang heard of this venerable monk and invited him directly to his palace. And Bodhidharma thought, that sounds like a good start. I will see how this emperor is receptive of the deep teachings of the Dharma. And so he went, and the emperor was a very pious Buddhist, and he greeted him very respectfully. And then he told him, I have created many monasteries, I set up many monasteries, I supported many monks and nuns, I had sutras handwritten, hand-copied, and many other merits. And then the emperor was pretty proud of what he had done in his lifetime to support the Buddhist teachings. And he said to Bodhidharma, so I did all these things, and how many merits have I created? And Bodhidharma, well, we all know in Buddhism, we create good karma when we do good deeds, and especially being generous, we create good karma. And when we support monasteries, we donate to monasteries, to the 3 jewels, to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. That is really great merits that we create. This is the teaching of basic Buddhism. But Emperor Liang was very proud of his deeds, and he was expecting some praise from Bodhidharma. And so when he asked the question, Bodhidharma, how many merits did I create by doing this? And Bodhidharma said, none. And that is also actually a very famous Chan story, and because many people don't understand. They think, oh, but we all learn to always cultivate good merits. How come that Bodhidharma says none? And then the emperor also says, so how come that I have no merits? And Bodhidharma answered, well, these merits, this is the fruits, the small fruits of having a rebirth in the heavenly realms or as a human being. But this is merits with that is leaking, because when the merits will be used up, they are gone. So this is not really everlasting merits, virtues. And so he asked him, so then what is the true virtues? And Bodhidharma said, pure wisdom, wondrous perfection, the essence that is empty and still. that is the true virtues. So here he refers to the virtues of pure mind. The pure mind that is on the one hand still and empty, still of thoughts, empty of everything, but at the same time it is full of wisdom, full of miraculous function and perfection. So that is when we realize this mind, this is really true virtues that are everlasting. When we can really realize this mind, we can tap into this mind. It's like tapping into a source that is never exhausting. And the emperor didn't really understand. And so he said, what is the ultimate holy truth? And then Bodhidharma said, openness, but nothing holy. And Bodhidharma answered, and the emperor he was perplexed and he didn't understand what's going on. So he asked, he started to have a doubt about Bodhidharma, and then he said, who is facing me right now? So in other words, who are you? And Bodhidharma said, don't know. And then the audience ended, and Bodhidharma realized the emperor is not ready for this deep teaching of the mind. So but he said, don't know, because he saw the emperor is only grasping at words and concepts, and he's not ready to let go. He's not ready to understand really the true principle of mind. So he at that evening he saw that the conditions for his teaching were not ripe in this land in the south, and he crossed the river to a neighboring country in the north, and then he made his way, and he actually also met the emperor or the king of the northern kingdom. And also he realized the king doesn't really understand the deep teachings. So he went on, said to himself, okay, the time is not ripe, but that's also something that is deep wisdom, to see when the conditions are not ripe, when the conditions are not matching, there's no point in forcing something. It doesn't make sense. It won't work if we force something when the time is not right. So when we see what we want to do, we have good ideas, we have innovations, we want to do something, and the timing is not right, the conditions are not right, then it's time to just wait, to retreat, and to see this now. It's not the time to fight for it, because when then we go in and we waste all our energy and put in all our energy when the timing is not right, there won't be a good outcome. So in the end, we have exhausted ourselves for nothing, and maybe we have even created a lot of bad reactions to our idea or our project, because there's a lot of resistance. And so the wise person knows when to be active, when the conditions are right, when it's time, and you see the conditions are right, then there's no time to waste. And it's very important to be very active and to continue to do your things, to work on your project. But when the timing is not right, to just withdraw. And what to do while we are waiting, we are not just hanging around and checking our phones all the time, but we use the time for our own personal practice. So Bodhidharma, he saw that was not the moment to propagate the Dharma yet. So he went to the north. He went to what is now famous, the Shaolin Monastery, and there he found a cave near the monastery, and he just decided to sit in the cave and meditate. And so the cave was a place that had a door where also before him there were monks who had meditated there. And so he sat in this cave facing the wall, and he didn't talk. So that for 9 years. So that is a very long time. And he was already old at that time when he arrived. So he knew the time wasn't right to teach. So he just took the opportunity to meditate and sit in the cave, meditate. And after 9 years, there was a disciple, a monk who came and who wanted to ask him for his teaching. That's another very famous Chan story. That was the Venerable Master Huike, and he came to, his teacher sent him to Bodhidharma, to cut it short, and he came to Bodhidharma's cave in the winter. He had walked there for maybe many weeks, and he knocked at the door, and Bodhidharma didn't let him in. He meditated, and then when he knocked again, Bodhidharma let him in, and he said, "Oh, can I please learn the highest teachings?" And Bodhidharma saw that there was still something missing in his mind, a little bit of determination. And he said to him, "The teachings cannot be obtained lightly, and with pride or anything, you can never gain the teachings. And actually, there's nothing to gain." And so he closed the door, and the monk was determined. And that's another thing we can learn. When we are really determined on the right, we have the right goal. It's for the sake of the Dharma, for the sake of our enlightenment, then not to give up easily. The Dharma is really very precious, and now we have the impression we can get the Dharma anywhere. There's hundreds of YouTubes, hundreds of scriptures, and all kind of Dharma material. But if we want to really enter the Dharma, we need a big determination, and we need deep respect for the Dharma and appreciation. And our mindset must be open. We must be ready to accept everything. And so Bodhidharma was meditating, and the Master Huike didn't give up. He had walked there for so many weeks. So he said, I've come here for the true Dharma, for my enlightenment. So he decided to stay there and stand outside the door of Bodhidharma's cave to wait for him to be let in. So he waited there in the snow, and then the whole night it was snowing heavily. So in the morning, the snow was already up to his knees, and he stood there without sitting down the whole night. And the next morning, Bodhidharma opened the door and said, "You are still here. I can see you are really determined to learn to receive the teachings." And so he accepted him in. And then the monk, he asked him a question. He asked, "Dear Master, my mind is not at ease. Can you please appease my mind?" And so Bodhidharma said to him, "Okay, take it out and show it to me." How can we do that? And he stood there, and he stood for a while and didn't know what to do, what to say, and tried to find his mind and how to show it to Bodhidharma. And after a while, because the mind you cannot grasp, he said, "I cannot find it." And then Bodhidharma told him, "I have already calmed your mind." And in this moment, he got it, and he was enlightened. He found his true mind. And so then he was Bodhidharma's first disciple, and he also became the next patriarch. The second Bodhidharma was also considered as the first Chinese patriarch of the Chan tradition in China, and Master Huike became the second patriarch of the Chan tradition. And so from then on, Bodhidharma taught other monks. He started teaching, and so we have unfortunately only a few teachings available, but his teaching time was also pretty short, and probably also a lot of individual teachings. And then we have a few texts that are transmitted, and there's the Essence of Mahayana Practice is one of the texts. There are some others. There is a translation of Red Pine of a few texts of Bodhidharma in English. And so Bodhidharma had started teaching and had a few disciples, and actually many of the disciples, of the few disciples, already understood their true mind. There was also a nun, by the way, who was an enlightened disciple of Bodhidharma. But among enlightenment, there's different levels of how deeply the experience is of true mind, of our true nature, of the nature of awareness. And so Bodhidharma tested them all, and he said publicly that Huike is the one who had understood the mind most thoroughly and had the most thorough enlightenment. And so he was the next patriarch. And so Bodhidharma was teaching this teaching of true mind. And because, as we knew from the encounter with Emperor Liang, Buddhism, this was about the 6th century, and Buddhism had already been in China for a few hundred years, and people had learned the traditional view of Buddhism, and there were people who didn't believe the teaching that Bodhidharma was teaching. That is the Chan practice, that it's about understanding our true mind, and that everyone has Buddha nature, and we can realize this Buddha nature in this lifetime. We don't need to wait asanga kalpas to become a Buddha, but we can realize the Dharmakaya, that is our true nature of the Buddha mind, in this very life. And that is different, and we can have different levels, different depths of realization of this Buddha nature. And so people, there were people who opposed to this kind of teaching, and also other people who were jealous of Bodhidharma because he was well respected, and they tried to poison him. And so you can see people in the old days were not much different from people these days, where they also poison others, and there's jealousy, and people try to harm each other and so on. So people tried to poison Bodhidharma, and because of his power of mind, every time he was able to detect this poison and not let himself be poisoned. And the 6th time, and then his enemies were getting angry because he wouldn't die. But he, at the 6th time, he was already 120 years old. He saw that his conditions in this world had already been fulfilled, what he needed to do to transmit the teachings of Chan to China. He had done. He had found the second patriarch, and so he just gave in to this poisoning. So he knew he was poisoned, and then he ate the food nevertheless, and he sat down in meditation, and then he entered nirvana. And that is officially the end of Bodhidharma's worldly life, and he was then buried in near that place, near Shaolin Monastery. and there's a pagoda that can be visited today that is still available, that's still standing in China. But so in those days, we see that monks were not cremated. Nowadays, monks are always created. But in those days, in Chinese culture, they were buried. And then a few years later, there was a Chinese official who went to Central Asia via the Silk Road. There was an exchange on the Silk Road of merchants and also monks and also government officials. And so there was this government official who had spent a few years in Central Asia, and he was on his way back to China. And on the way, he met a monk with a bare foot and a stick, a pole on his shoulder. And on the pole, there was dangling one sandal. And so he talked, because you don't meet many people on that long road trip. And so they talked, and he talked to that monk, and he said, I'm going back to India. And he asked who he was, and he said, I'm Bodhidharma. And then when he came back to China, he went to the emperor to report about his mission in the Western countries. And he said that on the way back, he had met Bodhidharma returning to India. And the emperor said, of course, that's impossible. Bodhidharma already died a few years back. And then the emperor said maybe it was so hot in the desert and that was a hallucination and or something else, but that can't be possible. That was Bodhidharma. And so but the official, he was so sure that he saw the real Bodhidharma that he had a little dispute with the emperor, and that ended in the emperor, in order to prove that he was right, he ordered the grave to be opened and to prove that Bodhidharma was in the grave. But instead, when they opened the grave, they found the grave completely empty. Only one sandal was remaining in that grave. That is a story of Bodhidharma's ending, and you may believe it or not, it's up to you. But to say what we can say as from the view of a practitioner, someone who is deeply enlightened to that level of Bodhidharma, truly has the power to overcome the physical limitations of the physical body and also the physical world with the power of his mind. So that who knows, maybe that was true. But that is only just for you to let you know, because that is part of a very famous story of Bodhidharma. And often when you see statues now or paintings of Bodhidharma, you see Bodhidharma with one shoe on his on the pole or on his luggage, and that goes back to this story. Yeah, so much about the Bodhidharma. Now we come to the text. We don't have much more time left, but I would like to first of all to talk about the title of the text. The English title, The Essence of Mahayana Practice, is actually not exactly the translation of the title that of the original text. And the complete title of the text is Great Master Bodhidharma's Essential Discourse on Entering the Mahayana Path by Principle and by Practice. So that is in Chinese, 达摩二入四行观 is the short title in Chinese. And here, great Master Bodhidharma is the teacher here of this, the author of this text. And we just heard about a short biography about Bodhidharma's life and his wisdom and his teachings. And here it is the Essential Discourse, means that this is just a brief, very short text, a short teaching, but it is very concise and has some important message in this short text. And then on entering the Mahayana path by principle and by practice. Here, what is called the Mahayana path is not the Mahayana in theory of, okay, I want to attain Buddhahood and I practice the Bodhisattva path, and it's one of the Buddhist traditions. But here, and that is like what we usually understand as the Mahayana path, but here it's about the path of the Mahayana mind. So the path or the way in Chinese Tao is also the path in our mind. It's our mind. The Mahayana path here means our true mind. The Mahayana mind, which is the mind that is our true nature, that we call our Bodhi mind, the nature of awakening or the nature of awareness, the mind of awakening, the mind, the Bodhi mind. And that is, we also call that true mind or pure mind. And that mind is our true nature, the ground of our being. And now in the text, we will talk more about this pure mind. We will elaborate on that, especially next class. And here it's about, in the Mahayana teaching, the practice is all about realizing this Buddha nature, realizing it in this lifetime and bringing that realization to perfection, and that is Buddhahood. So it's the same mind that is the mind that is listening to the Dharma right now, the mind that is only listening without discrimination. This mind cannot be grasped. It's the mind of knowing without thinking. This very mind is the essence of our being. And this essence of our being, that is what we call our true nature, and that is also what is here called the Mahayana mind, the great mind to have, that is limitless, that is formless, that is empty, but not only empty, but the mind has the capacity to bring forth all phenomena. So we say the true mind has two aspects. One is true emptiness, and the second aspect is miraculous function. So those true aspects, they go together. They are two sides of the same coin. And in this text, Bodhidharma helps us how we can enter, that means enlighten, to this true mind. We need an entrance. If we just sit here and we think about it, that's not enough. We cannot realize it. But the key is how we can realize this mind, that we can access is, that this mind can manifest in our present moment. And so this is what this short text is about, how we can manifest or give this mind a chance to manifest. And there's two ways. We will come about that later. The way entering by principle, that is one, and the other is entering by practice. Those are the two different ways to enter, to realize this true mind. They are equally important, and if we need some way to enter, if we don't enter, then if we don't practice, we just continue our worldly thinking, our worldly mind, and we won't be able to really enter into this mind. And so that is what this text is about. And there are altogether five paragraphs. The first paragraph is about entering the way by principle, and the next four paragraphs are about entering the way by practice. And there are four different practices. Accepting adversity is one, adapting to conditions is one, seeking nothing is one, and acting in accordance with the Dharma is another one. So in the next 5 lessons, we will talk about each of those 5 chapters in this text. Yeah, so far for now, for today. So now we still have an opportunity to ask questions. So if you have a question, maybe Aya Soma can moderate.
Thank you so much, Venerable. And Gita seems to have a question here. Who says, Venerable, I have heard in the Mahayana teachings, one is training to become a Sammasambuddha. When I read the Lotus Sutra, it was mentioned that Arahants too will one day awaken to be a Sammasambuddha. Is this a correct understanding, Venerable?
That is the goal. And the goal is to realize full, complete Buddhahood. That is true in Mahayana Buddhism. That is our goal, that we want to fully realize the fruit of Buddhahood. And in order to do that, we engage on the Bodhisattva path. In the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha predicted that also Arhats, even though they realize the Arhatship and dwell in that state of nirvana, but they can also advance and continue their path until they reach full Buddhahood. And in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha says that his main goal of the teaching is to lead all beings to full Buddhahood.
Great, thank you, Venerable. And Bhante Sudatta actually has a question. Dear Shifu, what is meant by triple emptiness?
Triple emptiness is actually, we also call it the emptiness of transmission. It's actually 3 aspects of emptiness, you can say. One is, for example, in the example of giving dana, we are the person, and there is an object that we give, and then there is a person, a receiver. So we have 3 aspects. We have the giver, the object, and the receiver. And triple emptiness means that all these 3 aspects are empty. So when we as the giver, we are like, my person is empty of a separate self, I'm empty of a person as that is me, I'm empty of the ego. So that is, and at the same time, the receiver is also empty of a separate self, is empty of an ego, and the object also is not real. The object is made up of the 4 elements, and the object is just also coming together of causes and conditions and doesn't have a separate entity. And so the object is also empty of a separate entity or a self. And that is just the meaning of the triple emptiness, or we call that sometimes emptiness of transmission. Depending on Chinese, it's called San Lun Ti Kong. I always say it as 3 aspects of emptiness in German.
Wonderful. Thank you, Venerable. And Michael asks, Michael, also known as Buddharuchi, asks, Spashi, in Taiwan, I found that many Buddhists were woefully ignorant of the basic tenets of early Buddhism. Is that your experience too?
No, actually not. I and of course there's these and those Buddhists, you know, and but for those, let's say for serious Buddhists and also for monks and nuns, when you go and study somewhere in a Buddhist institute, what we learn is it all starts with basic Buddhism, like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, and all these teachings. They are called basic Buddhist teachings. They should be available for all Buddhist practitioners. And well, as I said, when you are more serious in Buddhism, you will definitely receive those teachings. Also the meditation methods on the impurity of the body and the teachings like Anapanasati or Satipatthana, they are also taught there as part of the Buddhist curriculum. But of course, maybe the person is referring to, there's many lay Buddhists who are not so well versed in Buddhist theory, and they maybe they only know parts of the Dharma and certain methods of I can pray to Guanyin, and then Guanyin is fulfilling my wishes. And well, but this is not really profound Buddhism.
Thank you, Venerable. I will also add that that's the case pretty much throughout the Buddhist world, including the United States, so or Italy or Germany or wherever. So some people have a good knowledge of all the teachings. Some people have a partial knowledge. Some people have an experiential knowledge. Some people have all of it. I'm very glad that you have quite a lot of all of these aspects to share with us, Venerable. And Dan asks, dear Venerable, I heard you mention the term function, and I have noticed it in a few places around. What does this mean?
The mind, as I said, the mind has true emptiness and miraculous function, and that means that the mind has two aspects. One is the mind is empty, cannot be grasped, doesn't have a separate self, is not an emptiness, is not an entity, is not materialized, cannot be pinpointed, and cannot be grasped. That is emptiness. But at the same time, there is not nothing. There is the mind. When we in Mahayana we say the mind is creating all phenomena in the world. So all the world is actually a creation of our mind. We learn that the world is empty. We learn the world is an illusion, and we learn we ourselves, we are an illusion. But how this illusion comes to be, it's been created by our mind. And when our mind is delusive, we create something that we think we are real, that is actually a product of our own consciousness, the creation of the phenomena. And so that is the function of the mind. The mind is creating all phenomena. And when the mind is not pure, that means the mind is deluded, the mind is not enlightened, then we create a lot of impure things, and we create the world that we live in with a lot of suffering. But when the mind is enlightened, and the person who is enlightened is fully master of their mind, they can use this mind, this miraculous function, to create positive things. And so the function of the mind is the ability to bring forth all things, to bring forth all wholesome qualities and all wholesome states of minds, like wisdom, like respect, like gratitude, generosity, and joy. And all these are also functions of our mind.
Wonderful. Thank you, Venerable. And Tien Tat, I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly, says, thank you very much, sister. When we have strong emotions, how can we practice emptiness?
Well, that's a big question that will fill a big talk. Just in short, well, first is we need to know the idea of emptiness and contemplate that in our daily life when we have not strong emotions. So to contemplate on emptiness as our practice, as our general practice, to see that our body is made, or our five skandhas are just empty heaps, and the emotions are also part of the skandhas, to see that this is coming and going, that is conditioned by, triggered by things we experience by our senses, what we hear, what we see, what we feel, and so on. And that is triggered our emotions, and they come and go, and they are impermanent. So we can learn to, when we are not having strong emotions, to be more conscientious that our emotions are not real, that they are impermanent, they come and go, and we don't need to identify strongly with our emotions. But when they are present in this very moment and we are overwhelmed by the emotions, then we need to come back to our practice we are familiar with, our techniques, like when we are used to breath counting or awareness of breathing, then we use this method first to calm down our emotions, to take care of ourselves, to really focus on our breathing, or to do walking meditation, focusing on our steps, or to practice awareness and mindfulness, to focus on our tea drinking, and to not let our mind run crazy around the topic that is nourishing this emotion. Or some people have the practice to recite the Buddha's name, that all these are useful tools, and at that moment the tools come in handy to first survive the storm of the emotions. And the more we contemplate when we are calm, that emotions just come and go, that we are not the emotion, I am not my anger, I am not the jealousy. The jealousy is just an empty thing that pops up like a bubble, and that will burst, and then it's gone. And when we contemplate this in calm situations, this content may come up when we are, or shortly after we are dealing with emotions, and then we can deal with them more easily. That is just a very short answer to this big topic.
That was very helpful. Thank you so much, Shifu Simplicity. And Bante asks, you said that Chan practice is to realize one's true mind in this very life. Is full awakening of Buddhahood accessible in this life? Can Chan practice lead to becoming an Arahat in this life?
There we come to some slight differences in the teachings of Mahayana and Theravada. In Mahayana, well, first is to answer full Buddhahood. To be fully awakened to a Buddha is, let's say, very difficult in this lifetime. Not to say you need a few lifetimes to realize that. But it is possible to become an Arahat. Once there we talk about, when we talk about enlightenment to one's true nature or Buddha nature. This Buddha nature is the same nature that when we are unenlightened, when we have a small glimpse, when we have certain levels of enlightenment, and when we realize the full Buddhahood. It's the same Buddha nature. It's only the way of how deeply we can realize this Buddha nature, and how deep our wisdom is, how deep our understanding is of this Buddha nature. So in Chan practice, you can have a glimpse of your Buddha nature in, let's say, that's very pretty easy to attain. For example, when you practice more intensely, you do a 7-day retreat, or you do a solitary retreat, and you are not distracted, you focus your mind, and you are at the same time you are relaxed. And then when the moment is right, that may not be in your meditation, that may be when you read a text in a sutra, or when you drink your tea, or when you wash your face, you can have an experience of your Buddha nature. And that is a definite strong experience, and you know there's something different from your state of mind that you usually in. That this experience may only last for a few seconds, and that I call that an enlightenment experience. That is very important, because when you have that experience, you gain confidence in the teachings. And also the effect of that experience may last for months, because you get so boosted with confidence, and you see it's like the finger, it's like the moon. Yeah, when the moon is obscured by clouds, you don't even know where the moon is. All the clouds are dark and the sky is dark. But sometimes you see the clouds getting a bit lighter, and you see the shade of the moon behind the clouds. That might be this kind of experience. You see a cloudy moon, but you already see there is a moon. And then the clouds close up again, and you don't see it anymore, but you know there is a moon. So that gives you a lot of confidence there is Buddha nature. And so then it's about practicing to get rid of the clouds, to let this moon shine continuously. And that is the practice. So we often say in Chan, after enlightenment, the real practice only starts. And then you can, when you continue your practice and you have favorable conditions, you can have a big breakthrough, and that is the level of an Arahat you can reach in this lifetime. So you can see your Buddha nature to the level where you really get rid of all your impurities of the mind, you get rid of your greed, anger, ignorance, you get rid of your ego, and you, in this moment, you surpass the samsaric cycle. You overcome samsara, and in Chinese we call that liao sheng si, overcoming birth and death. And that is the goal also of Chan practice for the practitioner in this lifetime, to overcome birth and death. And then here comes a difference in maybe the teachings. We say, if you say that, let's say here, you have one point is enlightenment, and up to Buddhahood, there is still a long way to go. So that is the way of enlightened bodhisattvas. Enlightened bodhisattvas still, they have, with the function of the mind, with the power of their mind, they can come back in samsara as they wish. So they are not caught up in their karma, because they are not caught up in their ego. But if they want, they can manifest and continue the practice to full Buddhahood. So there's a difference in the Mahayana and Theravada teachings, that we say Bodhisattva path begins as unenlightened Bodhisattva, when you give rise to the mind of bodhicitta, the moment you make the vow, the aspiration, you want to realize Buddhahood, then you realize you engage on the bodhisattva path. And then on the path, you continue, and then there will be the landmark where you overcome birth and death. And then you continue on the bodhisattva path on the bhumis, we call the stages of bodhisattva, and then at the very end is Buddhahood. So that is still a long way to go, but you are already enlightened and you are not caught up in samsara anymore.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that clear explanation, Venerable. It's helpful to hear the perspective of the Mahayana tradition. And Michael says, can we say that a Buddha like an Arahat enters Nibbana and is then, by definition, unavailable to us?
It's difficult to answer what is unavailable. We, as I said, the function of the mind, the Nibbana, or we say Nirvana in Mahayana, is not nothingness. So a Buddha is somehow, the mind of a Buddha is still present. So in a way, the Buddha could still respond to us, but the Buddha is not there in his physical form. So you can say, and the great bodhisattvas, like, for example, Avalokiteshvara, or Samantabhadra, or Manjushri, those great bodhisattvas, they are equally on high levels where they are beyond rebirth, but they can make themselves available to the power according to the power of their mind. So they can respond to our calls. And so that is there is not nothing, if you want.
Great, thank you very much. And Gita asks, Shifu, the 7th level Bhumi is a non-returner. Is this correct from the 10-stage Bhumi Sutta?
I have to admit, I'm not, so I have to look it up. Yeah, there is there altogether, for those who are new to this terminology, there is different in different sutras. There's different stages of the bodhisattva path. For example, in the Avatamsaka Sutra, there is the 52 stages. And there's another sutra that has 42 stages, because a stage is not an exam that you pass, but it's a spiritual state, and that it's a continuous evolution of your understanding of true mind. That's why there are different definitions. There in the I have to look it up, which is the Bhumi, and that corresponds with Arahatship as where you overcome birth and death. There is a correspondence, but I have to look it up.
Thank you. And Bante asks, does your answer, the previous one, does your answer mean that a bodhisattva necessarily becomes an arahat sometime along their path to becoming a Sammasambuddha?
Yes.
Great. That's very interesting. And
yeah, I'm sure this is very new view on the Mahayana Buddhism for you.
I'm sure that Bhante Siddhasa would love to have a really long conversation with you on this subject matter. Maybe we can organize at a certain point a conversation between the two of you. But not today, not this morning.
Sure.
And last question, Michael says, may we refer to you as Fashu?
Sure, yes. Well, that's Chinese terms. You can call the Chinese monks and nuns Shifu or Fashi. That is both a respectful way to address monks and nuns.
Great. All right. And I think that's the last question, but there's definitely Bhante Sudhaso that says, I most certainly would enjoy that, to the conversation, the dialogue between the two of you. I think we will all enjoy it. So we usually end the class with 3 sadhus, and much gratitude for Shifu Simplicity for sharing the teachings today. I'm very looking forward to all the classes that are upcoming. So you can say 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.
All right.
Thank you very much for having me, and yeah, I feel very honored to be able to teach in your circles of Buddhist insights, and I hope to be able to come to New York one day.
Absolutely. You're always welcome, Venerable. And actually, for those of you who had asked about how to support Venerable's new project, we had put in the comments a link to the GoFundMe campaign, and I'll highlight it right now. So if you click on the comments on this link, you can find Venerable's GoFundMe campaign for the new center, and we wish you all the best. And also you can search for Miaofat Centrum in Berlin, where you can go and meet Venerable in person, perhaps maybe once the pandemic settles down a little bit. Or are you having
we just had a visitor from you here.
Oh, wonderful.
He's called Adine.
Adine. Ah, yes. We sent Adine to check out Miaofat Centrum. Oh, wonderful. Great. I'm happy that he made it. Okay. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right. So we can end the live stream for this morning, and see you all, well, this evening at 7:30 p.m. with Bhante Sumita, another monk.